let's talk about Rudy Gobert. And let's talk about the Rudy Gobert trade to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, this was a trade that happened a little while ago. We hadn't started up the network. Last week we were going to talk about it, but then the KD news started dropping. So ended up pushing it back a week, but it's still something that I feel like I should talk about. And the full details of this trade are that the Minnesota Timberwolves, they get Rudy Gobert. They're giving up Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Leandro Bolmaro, Walker Kessler, who was the 22nd pick out of Auburn, Jared Vanderbilt, a 2023 first, 2025 first, 2026 pick swap, 2027 first round pick, and a 2029 first round pick. First off, I'm going to talk about it from the Utah Jazz perspective. Then I'll get into the Minnesota Timberwolves perspective. Okay, so starting off with the Utah Jazz, this is a fantastic trade. I'll get rid of fantastic. If things go the right way, it'll be fantastic, because trading away Rudy Gobert is the icing on the cake with Donovan Mitchell's future in Utah. Because it's very clear now that Donovan Mitchell will not be staying there, because it's clear that they're trying to tank. And I think Donovan Mitchell's first out is 2025, and I've read reports that like the first chance that he gets, he's gone. Like, he's not staying there. Doesn't matter if they get Victor Wembanyama. Like, that doesn't matter. He's gone. So like, that's unfortunate for them, because Donovan Mitchell, getting a star like Donovan Mitchell is difficult. And Donovan Mitchell, him and Rudy Gobert may not have been the best match in terms of teammates, but it was still like they were a fun team to watch, and they had really good assets over there in Utah. But they did this move because they're clearly trying to set themselves up for the future, and they are trying to get good draft picks. Now, obviously, this year is Victor Wembanyama, the French freak of nature. Could they really get him? Potentially, but at the same time, the odds aren't like in your favor if you're trying to tank for him. So that's why I kind of like how many picks they got. Like, for Utah's perspective, getting 4 firsts is the bigger part of this deal. Not just, being able to tank for Victor Wembanyama, because honestly, they probably won't get him. Even if they have the worst record in the NBA, they've got a 14% chance at getting this guy. That's not why you do the deal. You do the deal because you want to tank for the next 2, 3, 4 seasons. And then that's when you draft everybody, because Donovan Mitchell's going to be gone. And this is a full reset for the Utah Jazz. They really don't have a lot of assets right now. I'm going to pull up their roster, because it's very limited based on what it's been, and especially when it comes, and when I say limited, I'm not talking about like I say like in terms of building for the future. I'm not talking about currently, like, because currently they still have some good players. Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, I like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Bogdanovich. Like, they have players, but in terms of building for the future, they've got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's 23 years old, who I liked, coming out of school. And I hope that, okay, I think we're all good. My computer started freezing a little bit. I'm just going to check that. Okay, yes. That seems to be looking okay, but that's really it. Like, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they drafted Walker Kessler, they got Walker Kessler from the Timberwolves. They have Johnny Juzang. That's about it. like that's their future right now. Udoka Azubuike, center. It's a very, very young team. There's not a lot of if one of the other guys on this roster comes out and they ball out, props to them. I'm not rooting against them. I'm kind of rooting against them. I'm an OKC Thunder fan, but I'm not rooting against any of those players individually. But they are now setting themselves up to be able to get those new assets. And hit that reset button, because they may not win the lottery this year, but they could in the next 3 years get themselves a top 5 pick or a top 3 pick. If they're lucky, a top 1 pick. because Donovan Mitchell's going to leave. Like, they're probably going to try and trade Mike Conley. They're probably going to try and trade Bogdanovich. Like, they're going to hit a full reset. The way that the Oklahoma City Thunder did, the way that the Houston Rockets did, that is what Utah's looking to do. Because look at how it's worked out for Oklahoma City and how it's worked out for Houston. It's gone fabulously. Right? Oklahoma City, they traded away Russell Westbrook. They traded away Paul George. They get Chris Paul. They trade away Chris Paul. Well, all of a sudden, after, 2 years, really, of tanking, they now have themselves Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who they got in the Paul George deal. They also got Josh Giddey, who looks to be a really solid player. They have Chet Holmgren. And then they drafted well with the later picks. They have other assets. But, like, those are the main players. The Houston Rockets. They trade away James Harden because they're like, you know what? We're done trying to win with James Harden. And James Harden wants out. They got him Westbrook, but it just wasn't working to the level that they were hoping it would. They couldn't win the championship. So they traded him away. All of a sudden, after a couple of seasons, honestly, like one season, they've got themselves a nice young core. And they, last year they drafted Jalen Green. They were in the top of the lottery last year. Jalen Green. This year, top of the lottery again. They get themselves Jabari Smith. They have other assets like Josh Christopher has been looking pretty good. But they also traded for Kevin Porter. I can't remember if they traded or they picked him up because he got cut. But they got Kevin Porter Jr. After the, off the court kind of issues that he had. They were able to get him. All of a sudden, they have a great young core. Very quickly, after turning away their best player, definitely the best player in the last 20 years for them. Best player since Hakeem Olajuwon. That's the mold now for tanking. Is you can tank and get that young core relatively quickly. Like really quick, like surprisingly quickly you can turn it around if you do it in the proper way. Now, the last time the Utah Jazz, had a high pick, it was Donovan Mitchell. And it worked out really well. So hopefully, they're hoping that they can get, that young player over the next couple of seasons. Maybe this year, they sneak into the playoffs with Donovan Mitchell, or they try and trade him because, we'll see what they do. But over the next couple of seasons, they are going to be trying to get themselves the best possible pick. And if they hit on 2 picks in the next 4 years, they get themselves 2 guys that can be stars. That's the building block. And hopefully they change their jerseys too, because those do not look good. But that's kind of the building block that the NBA has set. They traded for Walker Kessler. They're hoping that he can maybe be their center, as they're rebuilding. He's just a really big body, decent defender, and hopefully he can kind of be the sure guy in the paint. But now they need that scorer. They need that star. That's where the draft comes in. That's where all those extra picks come in. The more picks you have, the more you can miss on and the more chances you have on hitting big. I think it was a great deal for the Utah Jazz. The way that they were able to get 4 firsts for Rudy Gobert, I think shows, how valuable Rudy Gobert is. And now let's get into the side of the Minnesota Timberwolves, because Rudy Gobert, I think, is a great player in the NBA. I've been defending Rudy Gobert for a very long time, and when I was looking for that Jim Barnett interview on the old podcast that I used to do, I saw in 2020, had a video that I did with my buddy Connor, and we were talking about Rudy Gobert's new contract, and, could it potentially be one of the worst contracts, in modern NBA history? And, I didn't have the time to listen to it, but I just thought it was funny that, I've been talking about Rudy Gobert for a long time. And I've always really liked Rudy Gobert. He is a fantastic defender. And I think he is still very valuable in the game of the NBA today. I think a lot of teams would do great things with Rudy Gobert. I feel like his defense is wildly underappreciated. And while he can't get outside of the paint and defend, having a guy that can deter driving players is necessary. And if you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves, who bounced them out of the playoffs last year, and how did they do that? It was John Morant and the Memphis Grizzlies driving the basketball and making difficult layups. So, it was very clear that they wanted rim protection. But That rim protection is fantastic. When you're in a league that has guys like Giannis, and then it has, drivers like John Morant, drivers like Trae Young, you want someone that can shore your defense up. However, with that said, I don't know how well it's going to work with Cat and Rudy Gobert. I think it's going to be incredibly interesting because I like Cat and I really like Rudy Gobert. I also like Anthony. I'm not going to go through. I'll go through the whole roster at some point, but not right now. I like those two guys, but neither of them are really able to guard on the perimeter. Cat's not a great defender, but at least he's a big body. So when someone's trying to back him down, a guy like Jokic or something like that, he can at least kind of hold his ground. He's not a great shot blocker by any means. He's an offensive player, and you now have this kind of cool duo of great offense, great defense. Playing together at the power forward and center spot. Most likely. I mean, I feel like you have to start Rudy Gobert. I don't understand. If they make this trade and they don't start Rudy Gobert, I think it would be ridiculous because Rudy Gobert is a player that you need out there against the starters because those are the best players that you need to stop from making the difficult layups and dunking on your team. But the way the teams are going to be able to, I feel like, abuse this duo is going to be pretty brutal because we're going to go out there and we're going to sit back and we're going to watch Chris Paul, we're going to watch guys like maybe Trae Young, guys like Steph Curry, the undersized guys that love to run, they run that pick, they get the defender on the hip, whatever. If they're going to run a pick and roll and the Timberwolves are going to have to switch, you can now run it with their power forward or their center, and you're going to have a guy with a mismatch. You're probably going to run it on Rudy Gobert. But, I don't know. It just seems really weird. The way that they're going to have to play defense, they'll always kind of have a center, I guess, that can kind of stay in the paint. But Cat is not, he's not a shot blocker. He's not going to be great at deterring shots. So, if you get Rudy on your hip, you may be able to drive, and Cat may be able to maybe deter it a little bit. But, if you play a 5-out or something like that, you have a stretch 4, which most teams in the NBA have a stretch 4. Cat's not going to be able to sit on the inside, or Gobert's not going to be able to sit on the inside while the other one is pulled out. And so that's going to be kind of difficult to watch at some points, but at the same time, they're going to have some favorable matchups where one of those two is going to be dominating. Getting rebounds against the Minnesota Timberwolves is going to be really hard. It's going to be incredibly difficult. And then offensively, they're going to be explosive. Rudy Gobert, I think, is actually a really good fit for them offensively, which is saying kind of a lot because Rudy Gobert is not an offensive player by any means. But this is an athletic team. This is a team that can move down the floor. Anthony Edwards is a monster. Super athletic. D'Angelo Russell, I think, is really solid. But now they have Rudy Gobert, who's great at catching lobs. And so, Cat's not a lob catcher. Cat's not a great dunker. Cat doesn't have the vertical or anything like that. Now, he can dunk. He can score. He's the pick and pop. Rudy Gobert on the backside, on the weak side, maybe Anthony Edwards drives, right? He drives in. He can kick it to Karl Anthony Towns, who we all know is a great shooter. And I honestly believe Cat when he says he's the best big man shooter of all time. He can kick it out to him, or he can throw it up and throw a lob to Rudy Gobert, which is a new element to that offense that we haven't seen. And I think that's something that's really interesting. And that'll be something to keep an eye out for, is how they're going to be able to utilize not Rudy Gobert on the defensive end, but offensively. I think that's the area that's going to be the most interesting. Because, we're going to see how teams defend the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? Do you throw you got to throw your center on Cat because you're more worried about Cat offensively. And so if it's Joel Embiid, if it's, Jokic, you're throwing them on Karl Anthony Towns. Well, all of a sudden, that means there's, a power forward trying to guard Gobert, giving him an even bigger size advantage. I mean, it's going to be really nice. Like, offensively, I think it'll actually work. I'm questioning the defensive side of the ball, which I never would have thought. Seeing a Rudy Gobert trade and then being like, well, I don't know how it's going to work defensively, but offensively, I think it'll work great. I don't know. I don't really know why I love it offensively. Now I'm going to go through the roster, to make sure that I don't forget anybody. But, you're starting off with D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards, two good ball handlers. Anthony Edwards, incredibly athletic. But then you got Kyle Anderson at the small forward spot. Maybe they start McDaniels. I don't think they start Taurean Prince. So, yeah, I think it's probably going to be Kyle Anderson unless they go like Anthony Edwards at the 3 and throw Austin Rivers at the 1. Not expecting it. It's just possibilities. And then Rudy Gobert at the center spot. That's it's weird enough to where it'll work offensively, I think. It's just defensively, like D'Lo is not a defender. Cat's not a real defender. Anthony Edwards, like, he's at least athletic. Like, he can kind of play some defense. He's got the size, but, at this point in his career, I don't see him as, like, a great defender. I think eventually he could maybe get there. Kyle Anderson, a vet in the NBA. He's not bad by any means. Like, he's decent. But I just don't really know how it's going to work altogether defensively, which is why I'm like, I said Rudy Gobert trade flop, not for the, I think it's just kind of for the Timberwolves, but at the same time, like, I think it could work. There's a scenario where it works. And I'm rooting for that scenario because I talked about this when the Houston Rockets traded for Russell Westbrook. They had Westbrook and Harden. I love when teams try to mix it up. Everybody in the NBA is going small ball, and they're trying to get smaller, and they're trying to get shooters, and they're trying to, get the 3-and-D guys. I love when teams zag when everyone else zigs. They are going ultra big man style. There's going to be teams that they're going to throw out their power forward, and it's going to be like a 6'6" guy, and he's got to guard Karl Anthony Towns. That is not a good matchup. Like, yeah, maybe he can switch on to him every once in a while and, guard him. But every play down the court, he's going to get abused. So, like, in a lot of situations, they're going to match up really well against a lot of teams. They're also going to match up really poorly against a lot of other teams. And it's just going to be really interesting to watch them, play. They're not going to be a team that I'm going to want to play. Because they're going to be really explosive. They're going to have a lot of times where they can put up a ton of points. And then if you don't have the right players and the right skill set, defensively they could be okay. If you're not being able to switch on to Karl Anthony Towns and take advantage of, the speed and size difference, it's going to be very difficult for you. But on the other hand, if you do have that speed and size difference and you're able to get the switch consistently on Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, you can abuse that defense. We're going to see how they play. I mean, maybe they don't switch. Maybe they play zone. I honestly have no idea. I mean, they could play zone. Throw Rudy Gobert in the bottom of the paint. But not zone every play. Switch it out a little bit more zone than a lot of other teams play, just to keep Gobert around the paint, and reduce Gobert having to switch out. And then all of a sudden, like, yeah, you may be driving on Karl Anthony Towns, which you may get a step by him, but all of a sudden you have Rudy Gobert there. So, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of talking myself through it into liking it a little bit more. So I think I do like the move, but it's really interesting. I'm excited to see how it, pans out. But I always love when teams, try something new. And the Timberwolves roster that they had constructed, I don't think was championship worthy. Is this one? Probably not, but it at least could say, if it works out, they're like, okay, Cat, Gobert, Anthony Edwards. We know that works. Maybe they deal D'Angelo Russell. Maybe they try and get some picks. Maybe they try and add another player in free agency. Whatever it is, they can make some changes based off of what happens. But this is going to be a really interesting learning opportunity, for the Minnesota Timberwolves and for the rest of the NBA. Because if it works out, we could see some teams going back. Because, back with, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and OKC, they used to line up with the Stash Bros lineup. And, they would have Enes Kanter and Steven Adams. And they would both be out there. And they would have like that really tall lineup, which was the opposite of the Warriors small ball lineup. And it was just an interesting dynamic between the two lineups. And I think it's something that the NBA could potentially do if it works. I'm excited to see how it, turns out. But, let me know what you guys are thinking about the Rudy Gobert trade. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it going to be horrible? Is it going to be fantastic? I don't know.